Hello, I'm Helen Bradley and welcome to this video tutorial on dividing a circle up into segments. Now we're going to do this a couple of ways. We're going to do this as shapes, and we're also going to do this just as a bitmap selection that you can do something with in Photoshop. So I'm going to start here in Photoshop with a brand new document, and because a friend of mine asked me to look at this, we're going to use her measurement. So I'm going to make it 10 inches by 10 inches with a resolution of 300 pixels per inch and a white background. So effectively this is at print size, but you can make it whatever size you like. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to the elliptical marquee tool and I'm going to drag out a circle. Now this circle needs to be about 8 inches in diameter, but right now I'm not really worried too much about how big it is. I just want it to look roughly the size it needs to be. So I've now got a selection here that is the size that ostensibly I want it to be. I'm going to the layers palette. I'm going to click here to add a new layer to my document. I'm going to stroke this by choosing Edit and then Stroke. So I'm going to add a 1 pixel wide black stroke around this shape, and you can use whatever location you like. It doesn't matter. I've just happened to use inside, and I'll click OK. So this is now a shape that is pretty near the size I want it and pretty near where I want it, but not quite. So let's look and see how we're going to fix that. I'm going to select the Move tool. I'm going to choose Edit and then Free Transform, because that gives me access to all these tools up here. And the first thing is that I want this to be in the center of the document. The document is 3000 pixels wide. It was 10 inches by 300 dots per inch. So if I multiply 10 by 300, that's 3000. So the dimensions are 3000 by 3000, which makes this spot in the middle 1500, 1500. So I'm just going to make this 1500 and this one 1500. Now at the moment the width and height are measured in percent and I want them in inches. So what I'm going to do is just right click here and choose inches. And this one's already set to inches, but you want to see them in inches. And I'm going to click here to link them together. So if I make this 8 inches, then this is going to be 8 inches as well. So I now have an 8 inch by 8 inch circle that's centered over the exact middle of the document. I'm going to click the check mark. So now we've got our circle. The next thing we need is something to divide it up with. So I'm going to go to this single row marquee tool, and it's something that you probably don't use very much, if at all, but it's going to be wonderful here. I'm going to add a new layer by clicking on the new layer icon, and I'm just going to click somewhere over here. It doesn't matter where, but I just have to click somewhere here. And that creates a marquee that goes the full width of this document. If we click over here, we make sure that it goes the full 3000 pixels, and it's only 1 pixel tall. I have black as my foreground color, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key on the PC. It would be the Option key on the Mac, and press backspace to fill that shape with that black color. Back to the Move tool, Edit, Free Transform, back to these settings here. I want the middle of this line to be at 1500, 1500. So I'm just going to make these values here, and you can see it's 10 inches wide and the height is so small it's just not really registering. So I'm going to click the check mark. And to deselect the selection, I can choose either Select Deselect, or I can press Control D on the PC, Command D on the Mac. I'm just going to move away from all of this. Just going to select another tool. You can see that we've got a line and a circle. So what we need to do is to rotate this line around to carve up our circle. Now my friend wanted 12 of these segments, so I need 6 lines because each of these is going to divide it twice. So I'm going to this layer here. I'm going to choose Layer, New, Layer via Copy. So that adds another copy of this layer that has this horizontal line in it right on top of the first. I'm going to choose Edit, Free Transform. The center point is already in position. All I need to do is to type in here an angle for the rotation. If this line is going to carve this circle up into 12 individual slices, then 12 into 360 degrees is 30, and so each of these has to be 30 degrees. So we're just going to type in 30 degrees, and then we're going to click the check mark. Now we're going to do the same thing all over again. Layer, New, Layer via Copy. We're going to do Edit, Free Transform. We're going to rotate this 30 degrees, and then we're going to hit the check mark. And then we're going to do it again. Now, some of you might be used to using a keyboard shortcut for this, and the keyboard shortcut is Control-Alt-Shift and the letter T. On a Mac, it's Command-Option-Shift-T, but you may find that when you do that, it doesn't work. So you might find that the angle is not correct. If you have problems with that, just do it manually. I just pressed that keystroke and it's worked just fine here, but I have had some problems with Photoshop, so I wanted to show you both ways of doing this. What you're looking at ultimately is having a circle that is divided into 12 individual segments. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to merge all of these together so we have a single layer. So first of all, I'm just going to turn off the background layer, and I'm going to go up to the topmost layer, and I'm going to add a brand new layer here. And this layer that is sort of a stamped layer that has everything on it is obtained by pressing Control-Alt-Shift and E. That's Command-Option-Shift-E on a Mac. If I turn the background back on and turn all these layers except the topmost layer off, then with the topmost layer you can see that everything is now on this layer, and we've still got our white background just so that it's easier to see everything. You can always scale up your artboard by pressing Control and the number 0. That's Command 0 on a Mac. So this is our shape. So we're going to the magic wand tool, just going to click inside here to make a selection of this shape. And this now becomes the shape that we can use to do things with. So I'm going to choose Edit and then Copy, because I want to copy this shape. And then I'm going to choose File, New, and I'm going to create a document into which I can put this shape. So I'm going to make this 4 inches by 4 inches because it's going to fit really easily in that. Again, I'm going back to my print resolution of 300 pixels per inch. I'll click OK, and I'm going to choose Edit and then Paste. And this is the slice, and it's got this little line around it. So I can go to the magic wand tool. I'm just going to select inside it, and I'm going to fill it with black. Alt backspace, Option Delete on the Mac. I'll just click out of the way here. Turn off the marching ants with Control or Command D. So this is our shape, and it's a 1/12 of a circle. Now there's a chance that you may want it to look like this. There's another chance that you may want it to appear upright. If you want it to appear upright, we're going to the Move tool. And what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this with Edit, Free Transform, and we're going to rotate this just 15 degrees, half of the rotation that we did earlier. I'm going to click the check mark, and I'm just going to move this up so it fits nicely in this document. And just for neatness sake, I'm also going to try and center it. And it's probably not going to center exactly, but it's certainly fitted nicely inside that document. So at this point, if this were a shape that you wanted to use over and over again, you would go ahead and save this as a PSD file so that you have access to the layer that has this shape on it. Now, in my friend's case, she wanted to fill this with a pattern. So we're going to have a look at how you would fill it with a pattern. I'm going to choose Layer, New Fill Layer, Pattern, and I'll click OK. Now I've got a lot of patterns here, and I just happen to have this sort of hand-drawn pattern that I did for one of my classes at Skillshare. So I'm just going to fill this layer with a pattern, and I can scale it so I can make it bigger or smaller as I wish. So I'm just going to make it about 100% and click OK. So right now I have this layer with a pattern in it, and underneath it is the shape that I want the pattern to be. Now this pattern has a white fill. It's a stitch on a white fill. So I can just go to this topmost layer here, click on it, and choose Layer, Create Clipping Mask. And that clips the pattern to the shape below. Now there's an advantage to doing it this way if you have a pattern that has a fill in it, because we can go to this layer below and move it around, and you can see that the portion of the pattern that shows inside this shape is changing. So we can get a really nice positioning on our pattern by just moving things around. So in particular, I'm looking at the bottom of the shape here just to make sure that there's plenty of pattern in the pointy end of this shape. Now, if you have a pattern that's transparent, things are not going to look nearly as good. I'm going to double click here and I'm going to go to a pattern that has transparency in it. So let's just have a look. I have this pattern that's like some circles. And already you can see the problem. They're black circles in the pattern and they should be able to be seen, but because there's transparency in the pattern, we're seeing straight through to the black underneath. So it's not highly successful. For now, I'm just going to click OK. What I need to do is to release this clipping mask. So I'm going to go to Layer, Release Clipping Mask. So the pattern's now visible. The problem is this shape underneath is no longer behaving as the clipping mask that we want it to behave like. But there is a solution. I'm going to select this layer and I'm going to the magic wand tool and I'm just going to click outside this area where there's nothing in the layer. So I'm just going to click there. So I have everything selected except the black triangle or the black 12th of a circle. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to click up here on this pattern fill layer. I'm going to click on the mask. So it's got a little border around it telling me that I'm working on the mask. Black is my now foreground color, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key and press backspace. On the PC, on a Mac, it would be Option Delete. That's filled the mask with the colors that we need to actually clip the pattern to the shape. So I'm just going to choose a tool other than the Move tool, Control or Command D to deselect the selection. So the white fill is coming from this background layer, but the pattern is coming from this layer and it's clipped to the shape that we created. If I double click on this, I can now scale my pattern. So this is another way of achieving the same result, and it's the optimal way to work if your patterns have transparency in them. If your patterns don't have transparency, then you can use the clipping mask process. The other possibility is where you want to create a shape that you could reuse over and over again. So we're going to see how we would do this using a custom or creating a custom shape. The best place to start this is with a new file. So we're just going to choose File New and we're going back to our 10 by 10 inch document. I'll click OK. Now you want to have your wits about you a little bit as you're doing this, but what we're going to do is we're going to be working with the Paths palette. So we're going to bring the Paths palette out here, and let's bring the Layers palette out too, just so that we can see what's happening. So we're going to the Ellipse tool, and this is the Shape tool. So we're going to make sure that we're working with a shape, and I'm going to make sure that it has no fill, but it has a stroke. I'm going to hold the Shift key as I drag out a circle, and I'm going to rely on the Properties dialog for getting it in the right place and the right size. I'm going to right click and choose inches because I want to work in inches. This needs to be 8 by 8. And I can set the X and Y into inches as well. So I'm just going to set these to inches. Now, if this is an 8 by 8 circle and the document is 10 by 10, there's going to be a 1 inch gap around this shape. So I'm going to set the X and Y to 1 inch, and that's going to put this right in the middle of the document. With the ellipse selected, you'll see that in the Paths palette we have an ellipse shape path, but when I click on the background you can see that the shape disappears. Well, it's the shape that we want, not this ellipse layer. The ellipse layer is just here to make you feel comfortable that you've actually got a circle. It's this that we really need. To protect this from disappearing, I'm just going to drag and drop it onto the new icon. So when I click away, you can see that the one that is related to the ellipse layer is disappearing, but the one that we saved is just sitting there. So that's what we want there now. And in actual fact, we can delete this ellipse because we don't need it any longer, but we need the shape. So I'm going to add a new layer here, and we're going to do a rectangle this time. I'm going to select the rectangle tool. I'm going to drag out a rectangle that is approximately over the bottom of this document. Now, I don't know why Photoshop seems to default to drawing from the middle, and it's really annoying when it does, but I'm just going to put it down roughly where it should be. And I'm going to rely again on the Properties panel to get this right. So again, I'm going to be working in inches. So I'm just setting all of these settings to inches just so life is a little bit easier. I want this to stretch the full width of the bottom of the document. So it's going to be 10 inches. Okay, and its height is going to be half of the document. So that's 5 inches. And the X and Y, well, the X is going to be 0 and the Y is going to be 5. So that gives me a 10 by 5 inch rectangle that is jammed in the bottom end of this document. I'm going to make a duplicate of this path because we know that as soon as we click away from the original rectangle, we're going to lose one of these paths, and we just don't want to do that. So again, I don't need the actual rectangle shape. I'm just looking for these paths. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use this rectangle to cut away half of the circle. So I'm going to select this rectangle shape. I'm going to choose Edit, Copy. I'm going to click up here and choose Edit, Paste. That gives me my circle and my rectangle together. I'm going to trash this rectangle. I don't need it any longer. I'm going to the Path Selection tool. I'm going to select over both of these paths. And what I want to do is choose one of these options that gives me half a circle. So let's have a look. That's not going to work. Intersect works. So if you don't know your Boolean arithmetic on shapes, and I don't blame you for not knowing it, just go down this list until you see in here exactly what you want. And what we want is a white semicircle. It doesn't matter whether it's the top or the bottom, we just want half a circle. And so once we've got our half a circle, we're just going to click Merge Shape Components. Click yes, and we're left with half a circle. So having now got half a circle, we're going to make a duplicate of this. And this one we're going to rotate. So we're going to choose Edit, Free Transform Path. We want to rotate it around this point. So of these 9 little boxes here, we're going to click the top middle one. And we want to rotate it around so that we can get an overlap that is just the piece of the circle that we want. So this time, let's continue to work on our 1/12 of a circle, but you can make adjustments for whatever portion of a circle that you want. So I want to rotate this around so that I'm left with an overlap of just 30 degrees. So I want to rotate it 180 degrees less 30. Well, 180 less 30 is 150. So I'm just going to type 150. You can see that these two are now going to overlap with just this 30-degree shape in the middle. So I'm going to click the check mark. Next, I'm going to choose Edit Copy because I need both these paths on the same path area. So I'm going to select here and choose Edit Paste. You can see that we've got what we want. For now, I'm just going to delete this piece because I don't need it. I'm going to focus on this shape here. Now, I've already got here in white in the paths palette exactly the piece that I want. If you don't see the piece that you want, just go back and click on all of these until you get a little diagram here in the paths palette showing you the piece that you wanted. When you've got that, you're going to choose Merge Shape Components. And here is our 1/12 of a circle. Now, if I zoom in here, you can see that there's a little bit of action going on around here. And what we end up with is quite a few little anchor points here. Now, you can live with those. You don't have to clean them up, but if you want to try and clean them up, what you're going to do is click here on the Delete Anchor Point tool, and you're just going to click on any of these that you want to delete, but you've got to watch the rest of this path here because if it starts jumping around and things start happening, you don't want that to happen, so you just want to undo it. You can probably get rid of all but 2 of these, but if you start getting rid of the second to last one, you can see the path moved then. Don't want that to happen, so I'm just going to leave it with 2 anchor points here. Control or Command 0 to zoom back out. Let's go to the Path Selection tool. So you can see that we now have this 1/12 circle path, and it's got 5 anchor points. That's all we needed to create it. In fact, we probably could have done it with 3, but because we don't have a heap of control over it, and because this is Photoshop and not Illustrator, we're just going to go with what we've got here. So now that we've got this path that is the exact right shape, we're just going to choose Edit, Define Custom Shape. And this is going to be 1/12 circle. And I'll click OK. And now I can just delete it because I don't need it any longer. It's a custom shape, so we can go to the custom shape tool, and the last shape in our custom shape list is going to be our 1/12 circle. So I'm going to go to a fill of red, for example, no stroke. And let's just drag out a shape, and you'll see that all of a sudden things don't look nearly as good as they did before. The reason for this is that I'm not holding the shift key. If I hold the shift key, I'm going to constrain the shape to the original proportions. And when you're doing this with something like a 12th of a circle, that's exactly what you'll want to do. You want to constrain that shape to the original proportion so that however big this is, it's always going to be 1/12 of a circle. Now, if you want to rotate it around, just choose Edit and then Free Transform. And for this to be standing up, we're going to need to rotate it around 105 degrees. We'll just click the check mark. And now it is the shape we created before. Now this is a shape, if you at this point want to make it a raster layer, you can just right click and choose Rasterize Layer. But this is another option for creating a 1/12 of a circle. In this instance, it's done as a shape, so you can have it as a shape. And of course, when you're drawing out shapes using Custom Shape Tool, you can also have them as paths, but you can too have them as pixels. So that's just like having a preset shape that will create pixels, paths, or a shape, whichever you need to create. Now the basis for creating this shape is exactly the same, even if you're doing like 1/6 of a circle or a quarter of a circle. You're just going to do slightly different rotations, but the basic principle is exactly the same. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you've learned something about Photoshop that you did not know. If you did enjoy this video tutorial, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel, and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com, where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications, including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.